Hello viewers, joining us today is the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, Professor of Education at the University of Michigan Flint, USA. Let's put our hands together for Dr. SAPNA THWAITE. A pleasure to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
How is Bangalore treating you? How is the city? How is the weather?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's start and talk about the weather first. It's been absolutely lovely. I walk outside every day and I'm just so thankful for the sunny weather and the fact that I'm not in 15-degree weather back at home. The people here at Kristu Jayanti have been extremely hospitable, very warm, very kind, and it's been an excellent experience. So I feel like I've really had an opportunity to get to know some students, get to know some faculty, get to know the culture here, and I'm just really happy to be here.
Wonderful. So I'm going to quickly dive into the questions I have here.
Yeah, please.
So could you elaborate on the connection between social emotional learning and literature?
Okay, so there are some core competencies related to social emotional learning, and some of those include, and I'm just going to name a few of them, making sure that you are self-aware, making sure that you're socially aware, making sure that you're making responsible decisions. And so when you think about those different facets of social emotional learning and make that connection to literature, it makes you kind of look more deeply at the characters in books and thinking a little bit about what are the motivations for the decisions that they make. Are they thinking about their own strengths and weaknesses and being self-aware when they're making different decisions? Are they more socially aware in the sense that they're understanding that there are people whose perspectives are different than their own? Are they making responsible decisions when they're faced with moral dilemmas? You know, things of that kind. And so there is a connection because it really has to do with what drives human motivation in some ways. And literature is a really great way to be able to discover that.
Right. How can educators integrate social emotional learning into their curriculum?
That's a really, really loaded question, and I could probably take a long time to answer that. I think it's the simplest way that I could answer that is, as a teacher, delve into your own identity and identities before you try to delve into the identities of your students. So take the time to become more self-aware. Think a little bit about what your own strengths and weaknesses are, what motivates you, what are your goals, and then take the time to get to know your students' identities as well. It's really important that we don't just look at students as being students, but that we actually recognize that there is a whole world out there beyond the classroom that they are a part of. And I just think taking more of that holistic perspective is probably the most responsible thing that teachers can do.
Right. So here, in this question, I just want your opinion here. In
Yeah.
your opinion, are there any specific literary works that you would recommend that would effectively help us promote social emotional learning?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So I just gave a talk just about half an hour ago about this topic. And I would say that for me, any book that deals with topics of identity and culture, there's an author that I really like. Her name is Jhumpa Lahiri. She's written a collection of short stories many years ago called Arranged Marriages. She also wrote a book that one of my personal favorites, it's called The Namesake. And you can actually experience through her character in that novel, the main character in the novel rather, all of the triumphs and challenges and situations that this person encountered related to identity. Right. And that to me is a book that I would really recommend. Anything written by her, but really anybody who's looking at the different types of identities that people bring to life. And, you know, literature is just a really great way to be able to explore those topics.
Right.
So I just gave you one or two examples. I can think of many others.
What challenges do educators face when incorporating social emotional learning into the classroom, and how can they overcome them? For example, if you want to integrate them over here at KJC, what challenges would the teachers face, and how would we overcome them?
So I think one of the major challenges that any teacher would face, whether it's a teacher or a professor at a university, is that we are accountable to standards. You know, there are national, sometimes state level standards that we're accountable to. There is sometimes a set syllabus that you need to follow, and that there might be kind of more external demands on how you teach and the ways in which you teach and the pace at which you teach, and getting to know the students as people might be harder to accomplish in that process. You know, sometimes also if you have a large class size of students, being able to get them to know students on a more kind of personal level and understanding their motivations is not as easy to accomplish. So I think that all of those things are realistic. But I again, for me, it's really not just focusing on students' academic well-being, but it's also looking at other aspects of their being that I think is important. And I think that, you know, through your demeanor in a class and the way that you engage with your students, you can communicate that point well.
Right. How does social emotional learning impact a specific student's academic growth as well as personal growth? How does that benefit? How does knowing about social emotional learning, what about applying it benefits a student?
Okay, so I'll give an example. Let's just say that you were in a situation where it was an emotionally charged situation. And knowing about social emotional learning might help you think about, okay, I'm conscious right now that I'm really angry and I have to find a way to manage my response. If you're not really in touch with yourself and how you're feeling at that moment, you might lash out, you might get in a fight, you might start yelling and screaming obscenities, you know, things that are not appropriate, right? But if you actually take the time to say to yourself, you know what, I'm really angry right now and I have to find a way to keep this in check in order for this situation to be a good situation, in order for this situation to improve, then maybe you'll then implement some kind of strategy to deal with that. Take a really deep breath. Say that you need to use the restroom. Walk away for a couple minutes. Splash some cold water on your face. Whatever you need to do. So I think that it's important to be in touch with emotions, and I think emotions are at the center of social emotional learning.
Right. So I attended your lecture, and I just wanted to ask you a question. How does literature help us? I want to exactly understand, how does a literary work help us be more empathetic and compassionate? Is it by putting yourself in the character's shoes? Is it trying to relate to that character? How exactly does that happen?
Yeah, I think if you're reading a book and you are able to connect with some sort of lens of personal relevance, I think that's really important. So if you're reading a book about a character and you are looking at that person's situation and putting yourself in their shoes and thinking, okay, what would I have done in that situation? That's one way that you are, you know, being empathetic. Another thing would be, you know, there might be a situation where somebody is doing something in a book and you're like, wow, I would never have done that. I've been through this situation and I did it very differently. I mean, I just think it's a matter of really throwing yourself into the book, you know, and I know this is not really the most practical way to say it, but it's almost like you're not just throwing your mind into the book, but you're throwing your heart into it too.
Right.
It's a little bit of both.
So you've been familiar with the curriculum here at KJC. We have a pretty much a lecture-based system.
Yeah.
So how do you think we can implement, do you have any ideas as to how we can implement social emotional learning into every course over here so that everybody, not just students of the English department, but everybody across all departments can benefit from understanding the importance of social emotional learning and applying it into their life?
Okay, so maybe one idea would be, and I'm not familiar with how you're assessed in your courses, so I'm saying this without knowing exactly how it happens. So it's really important to acknowledge that. But so we know that there are always going to be these external standards. We know that there are always going to be exams, right? These are things that are just built into the system. But the ways that professors informally assess their students can be one way that you can make connections to social emotional learning. So for instance, asking the students in the beginning of the class, how are we all feeling today? You did this reading or you did this assignment for today. How are we all feeling today? Let's do a one-word check-in. Go around the room and everybody say one word to describe how you feel right now. And if somebody says, I'm feeling frustrated, well, that's a perfect opportunity to say, well, why are you feeling frustrated? What was it about the reading last night that frustrated you? That's a really quick thing that you could do. Another thing that you could do is at the end of a class, ask students a question to comment on their overall response to an activity. You know, how did it make you feel? What did you like about it? What did you not like? What could we improve? And having them write it on a slip of paper and hand it to you as they walk out the door. So yeah, you could still have a primarily lecture-based classroom. I'm not in any way being critical of that. There's certain things that we do because that's how we do things, right? But there are little things that you could do in between that could maybe help.
Right.
kind of embed that perspective a bit
I'll
more.
make sure to tell my professor.
Don't tell them I said that.
I promise.
I have really, really enjoyed my experiences at this college. And I'll tell you, there are a number of different reasons why. One is it makes my heart swell with joy when I see so many students. Seeing all of these students walking around and in their classrooms and just the sheer volume of students. Post-pandemic, my university went through a transition where we have more of a hybrid schedule. And so there's some really great conveniences that are involved with this because sometimes you can do your work virtually.
Right.
Students can do their work virtually, but they're also here in person. My understanding is that you are all here 100% in person.
Yes,
And
we are.
it's been really nice to see people everywhere and even bumping into the same students in the hallways, just because it kind of, I don't know, it just makes me a bit nostalgic. So that's one thing I've really liked. I've really enjoyed meeting the faculty here. I've talked to quite a few faculty. My wish is that I'd have more time to talk to the faculty. And we are planning on coming back again in June. And so hopefully we'll have more opportunities. But I've gotten to know people's interests a little bit. And I think there are a lot of really wonderful points of synergy between faculty interests and our faculty interests. And I'm now going to be playing matchmaker and getting people together. And hoping that they'll be able to find some projects they can work on. So really, I can't say enough about the great experience I've had here, but I also feel like we've been really welcomed with open arms, and it's been a really lovely thing to experience.
Right, that's wonderful. So thank you, ma'am, for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for more in-depth interviews.